At exactly 11:47 hours on March 12, 2026, President Trump stood at the podium in the East Room of the White House and said the 6 words that would define the next 22 minutes of world history. Iran's military has been virtually destroyed. The markets reacted instantly. Brent crude dropped $8. The S&P 500 futures turned green. In London, the FTSE climbed 1.2% in 4 minutes. In Tehran, in an underground command facility buried 60 meters beneath the Alborz mountain range, a general named Brigadier Amir Khatami watched the clip on a monitor. He had been watching American news feeds for 72 hours straight. He had 340 missiles remaining in his operational inventory, down from 1,200 at the start of the conflict. He had 14 Fateh 313 precision ballistic missiles with a CEP of 10 meters. They're specifically allocated for one mission that had been held in reserve since March 1st. He had been waiting for exactly this moment, not because of the missiles, because of what the missiles would do to NATO. He picked up the launch authorization handset and spoke 4 words. Execute Plan Akrotiri, RAF Akrotiri, the British overseas territory in southern Cyprus. Coordinates 34.5833 degrees north, 32.9833 degrees east, home to the UK's most strategically critical airbase in the eastern Mediterranean. From its runways, British GR-4 Tornadoes had struck targets in Iraq in 2003. From its hangars, RAF Typhoons had supported operations in Libya in 2011. And as of 600 hours that morning, from its tarmac, Al Jazeera's satellite broadcast team had transmitted 4 minutes and 17 seconds of unedited footage showing American ground crews loading GBU-28 bunker buster bombs onto B-52H Stratofortress aircraft and bearing USAF markings. The footage had gone global within 11 minutes. The British government had been caught completely off guard. The Prime Minister's office had issued a statement saying no British personnel were involved in any offensive operations against Iran. The statement was technically accurate and politically catastrophic, because it confirmed what the footage showed, that Britain had allowed American bombers to use British sovereign territory to attack a country Britain was not officially at war with. In Tehran's command facility, Brigadier Khatami had watched that footage 7 times. He understood its strategic value precisely. Britain was now politically exposed. A missile strike on RAF Akrotiri would force the British government to make a choice in real time on live television with no preparation and no cover: formally enter the war in self-defense or absorb a ballistic missile attack on British sovereign territory and do nothing. Either answer destroyed NATO unity. If Britain fought back, France, Germany, and Spain, all of whom had explicitly refused to join the US-Israel coalition, would face immediate pressure to join a war they had spent 12 days trying to stay out of. If Britain did not fight back, Article 5 of the NATO Charter, the collective defense guarantee that had kept the alliance alive for 77 years, would mean nothing. 14 Fateh 313 missiles, 1 target, 1 political calculation. Add 22 minutes of flight time from their launch positions in western Iran. If you believe Britain will respond in time and NATO will hold together, comment 1 below. Because in the next 22 minutes, the most consequential decision in the history of the Atlantic Alliance is going to be made by a prime minister who just found out about it from a phone call during a cabinet meeting. The launch was detected by a U.S. space-based infrared system satellite at 11:48:44. SBIRS had been repositioned to continuous overwatch coverage of western Iran 12 days earlier. The 14 thermal bloom signatures of the Fateh 313 launches were registered, classified, and transmitted to CENTCOM in 6 seconds. CENTCOM transmitted to EUCOM in 4 seconds. EUCOM transmitted to RAF Strike Command and the UK's Permanent Joint Headquarters at Northwood in 11 seconds. The total time from missile launch to the moment Air Vice Marshal Caroline Ashworth at Strike Command received a confirmed ballistic missile threat notification against RAF Akrotiri was 21 seconds. She had 21 minutes and 39 seconds of flight time remaining. She had 2 assets that could theoretically engage the incoming missiles: a Royal Navy Type 45 destroyer HMS Diamond, operating in the eastern Mediterranean as part of a standing NATO maritime task force, armed with the Sea Viper air defense system, capable of engaging ballistic missiles in their terminal phase at ranges up to 120 kilometers. and a U.S. Army Patriot PAC-3 battery positioned at Akrotiri itself as part of an ongoing force protection arrangement, with 16 interceptor rounds available and full autonomous engagement authority. The problem was geometry: 14 missiles and 2 salvos of 7, each salvo timed 90 seconds apart to saturate the defenses sequentially. The Patriot battery could engage all 7 in the first salvo if its fire control solutions were clean. The second salvo of 7 arriving 90 seconds later, while the battery was reloading, was a different problem entirely. HMS Diamond, positioned 340 kilometers southwest of Akrotiri, could reach the second salvo's terminal phase only if it began its intercept run at maximum speed immediately. But HMS Diamond had not yet been given UK government authority to fire. It was a warship. It needed political authorization to shoot at missiles heading toward British territory. Air Vice Marshal Ashworth transmitted to Northwood, 14 Fateh 313 inbound, target Akrotiri, 21 minutes, requesting immediate weapons-free authorization for HMS Diamond and Patriot battery. The response from Northwood took 3 minutes and 17 seconds. During those 3 minutes and 17 seconds, the Fateh 313 missiles covered 142 kilometers of their journey. The British Prime Minister had been in a cabinet meeting discussing the political fallout from the Al Jazeera footage when her private secretary entered the room and placed a single sheet of paper in front of her. She read it once. She looked up at her defense secretary. She said one sentence: "How sure are we?" 100% Prime Minister, Esper's confirmation, 14 missiles, impact in 17 minutes. The cabinet room went completely silent. She had 3 options: authorize immediate engagement and accept that Britain was now a combatant in the Iran war; deny engagement authority and absorb the strike on British sovereign territory, hoping the Patriot battery alone could handle the first salvo, and gambling that 7 second salvo missiles would either miss or that Iran would interpret British restraint as a de-escalation signal; or invoke Article 5 of the NATO Charter immediately, calling an emergency North Atlantic Council session and demanding collective defense authorization before the missiles arrived, knowing the Council had never convened in less than 4 hours for any contingency in its history. She had 17 minutes. She chose option 1. She authorized weapons free for HMS Diamond and the Patriot battery at 11:52:43. Her exact words, recorded in the cabinet minutes recovered later, were, "Defend the base. We will deal with the politics after." HMS Diamond had already turned northeast and was running at 31 knots the moment the ballistic missile threat was first classified by EUCOM, anticipating the authorization that came 4 minutes later. Its Sea Viper fire control radar had acquired all 14 Fateh 313 missiles at 11:54 hours, tracking them in their mid-course ballistic phase at an altitude of 180 kilometers. The Sea Viper engagement sequence for the second salvo was calculated: 7 targets, 7 Aster 30, Block 1 NT interceptors, maximum engagement range 120 kilometers. The second salvo would enter that envelope at 12:06 hours, 2 minutes, and 40 seconds before impact with Akrotiri. HMS Diamond would have a single intercept window of 140 seconds. The Patriot PAC 3 battery at Akrotiri activated its engagement radar at 11:56 hours and began tracking the first salvo at terminal approach. 7 missiles, 16 Patriot interceptors available, 2 assigned per target, standard saturation protocol, with 2 rounds held in reserve. The fire control computer assigned intercept solutions automatically. The battery commander, U.S. Army Colonel Marcus Webb, confirmed the solutions manually and authorized autonomous engagement. At 12:03 hours, 6 minutes before first salvo impact, the Patriot battery launched 14 interceptors in a 40-second sequence. The launch sequence was visible from the beaches of Limassol, 12 kilometers to the northeast, 14 white plumes rising vertically from the base perimeter in rapid succession. Fishermen pulled their boats out of the water. Traffic on the A1 motorway stopped. 11 of the 14 Patriot interceptors achieved direct hit kill on their assigned Fateh 313 targets. 2 detonated on proximity fuse within lethal fragment range. 1 missed entirely, its target executing a terminal maneuver that the PAC-3's guidance update had not anticipated. 1 Fateh 313 missile from the first salvo was still incoming. Terminal velocity, Mach 3.8. Time to impact, 44 seconds. The CIWS system at Akrotiri's perimeter, a Phalanx Block 1B, acquired the incoming missile at 8 kilometers range and opened fire at 3 kilometers, expending 300 rounds in a 1.4-second burst. The Fateh 313 was hit at 1.2 kilometers altitude. Its warhead detonated 800 meters above the runway. The blast pressure wave shattered 47 windows in the operations building, overturned 2 ground vehicles. Itran ruptured the eardrums of 3 base personnel standing in the open. No fatalities, no aircraft destroyed. HMS Diamond Sea Viper engaged the second salvo at 12:06:14. 6 of 7 Aster 30 interceptors achieved direct hit kill. The 7th target, the final missile in the second salvo, was missed when the Aster 30 seeker lost lock during terminal phase in the electronic warfare environment generated by the first 6 detonations. The missile continued on ballistic trajectory. It impacted the airfield's secondary taxiway at 12:09:02, detonating its 480-kilogram unitary warhead and excavating a crater 12 meters wide and 4 meters deep across the taxiway centerline. The runway itself was undamaged. 2 B-52H aircraft on the western hardstand sustained minor blast damage to their tail sections. Both were repairable within 72 hours. The RAF Akrotiri was operational. The runway was open. The U.S. aircraft were undamaged. In the 22 minutes between missile launch and final impact, 4 things happened simultaneously that would define the next phase of the war. First, the British Prime Minister called the NATO Secretary General and invoked Article 5 at 12:04 hours, 5 minutes before the second salvo impacted. The invocation was the first in NATO history to occur, while the attack that triggered it was still in progress. The North Atlantic Council convened an emergency session. France, Germany, and Spain, the 3 NATO members who had most loudly opposed joining the US-Israel coalition, were now in a room being asked to vote on collective defense of British sovereign territory. Second, the Al Jazeera broadcast team at Akrotiri filmed the entire Patriot intercept sequence in real time. The footage of 14 white plumes rising from the base, followed by 11 detonations in the sky above Cyprus, was broadcast live to 190 countries within 90 seconds of the first intercept. 60 million people watched it happen on their phones. Third, Iran's state television broadcast Brigadier Khatami's statement from the underground facility. He was calm, precise, and surgical in his language. He did not claim a victory. He made a single declarative statement. Britain has been using its sovereign territory to bomb Iranian civilians. Today, Iran exercised its right to self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter. We struck a military target. We gave the world's media 4 minutes and 17 seconds of evidence broadcast on Al Jazeera on that the target was legitimate. This is not escalation. This is reciprocity. Fourth, the North Atlantic Council vote on Article 5 was called at 12:47 hours. The result was unanimous, but 3 nations, France, Germany, and Spain, attached a joint condition to their affirmative votes. NATO's collective defense response must be limited to defensive measures only. No offensive operations against Iran. No expansion of the conflict. Defense of British territory. Nothing more. The alliance held. By 3 conditions attached to a unanimous vote, it held. In the underground facility beneath the Alborz Mountains, Brigadier Khatami read the NATO statement. He had not expected the alliance to fracture on the first strike. He had expected it to fracture on the second. He reached for his operational inventory list. He had 326 missiles remaining. He had achieved exactly what he planned, a unanimous NATO Article 5 activation with 3 members publicly constraining its scope on live television, broadcast to every adversary and every ally simultaneously. The fracture was not in the vote. The fracture was in the conditions. He opened his planning folder for Plan Rhodos, the Greek island of Rhodes, home to another NATO member's airbase, another sovereign territory, another Al Jazeera camera team, another 22 minutes. Iran did not lose the missile exchange over Cyprus. It won the press conference.